Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Practical Planner Podcast. I'm your co-host Thomas Kopelman here with Rhodes, and actually my former boss, Justin Castelli, is on this podcast. So I'm really excited.
I'm going to stop you right there, Thomas. I was never your boss. Never your boss. We worked together. We were colleagues. I've never been a boss.
Okay, fair. Well, I viewed you that way, but Justin's a longtime friend of mine, mentor, somebody who's really helped me, and now also a member of the advisor council at wealth.com. But I'm really excited to jump into this episode. I mean, I'm guessing pretty much everybody here knows you, Justin, but if you want to give a little bit of background of kind of who you are and what you do, and maybe even the shift of, the life planning change that you've made recently as well.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on the podcast with you guys. My name is Justin Castelli. We've been over that. I have a firm in Fishers, Indiana that is RLS Wealth, which I launched back in 2015. So I've been a financial advisor my whole career, which is going to be 20 years this fall, which is wild to think that I'm that old. But nonetheless, that is kind of where I've been my whole career, and there's been an evolution as time goes on, which has led me to life planning, which we'll talk about today. But outside of being an advisor, because I'm not just an advisor and life planner, I'm also a husband and a father. I have 3 boys. The firm is named after them. My wife is an entrepreneur. She has a boys' clothing store called Roman and Leo. She did not rebrand her name when we had Silas.
But he's the model, so it works.
Exactly. Yeah, well, the other boys have all grown out of it. And he is getting ready to size out as well, which will be interesting. But, I love the profession that we are all in. I just left a book club with the AGC, and we were talking about the book Die with Zero. So having these cool conversations with other advisors about helping our clients really live from their money, experience life, and how do we do that? I think we have one of the best professions in the world because we get to make an impact on people's lives that very few professions can come close to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, this episode, right, we're really going to be talking about life planning and how that intersects with estate planning. But I think for some people, they might feel like life planning is almost like a buzzword, right? Like it sounds good, but what does that really mean?
At the highest level, when I think of life planning, it just means you're prioritizing the client's values in their life at the planning process, rather than starting with the numbers and seeing what kind of life can we create from the numbers. It's, this is the life that I want. How do I make the numbers support that? And there's a variety of ways to do life planning. So much like financial planning, there's, it's a broad term. I went through George Kinder's RLP, Registered Life Planning Designation process. I'm in the mentorship right now. But there are other ways to do life planning. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, it just comes back to placing the client's life and their values at the center and planning around that, where I've always considered traditional planning to be more numbers focused and fitting life into the numbers.
I mean, I think it starts to make sense, right? I mean, for you started your career 20 years ago, and I think it's almost been the shift of the industry, right? Like 20 plus years ago, it was investments, right? All you do is you have investments or you buy insurances. Then we started to move, and maybe there's a little shift to financial planning. And now we're at a world where I think everybody is starting to see the value of financial planning. But I think what good financial planners do is they don't just know the hierarchy of this account to this, and you need this and that. It's really all about like, what is important to you? What do you value? And how do we make sure that your financial plan and what you're doing with your money aligns with that? But I think this is where advisors come in and say like, great, this sounds awesome. Like, but how do we actually help get clients there, right? Because you have to have the right questions. You have to have the right conversations, because what I found, and I'm sure you found the same thing, is very few people know, right? Like we have the surface level goals of, we want to get married, and then we want to buy a house, and then we want to have kids, and then we want to retire. But like, those are not necessarily the goals of every single person once you actually dig into it.
I don't think those are the goals of anybody if they were given the choice. I think those goals would be on the list, but they're not the most important goals. But we're told that's what our life is supposed to look like. So there's different beliefs out there. I think clients who are going to be interested in life planning, they need to be at a certain space in life to where they're looking to go deeper and really figure out who they are. I think life planning works best when the individual being planned understands who they are and understand what they want. And as advisors, we can help clients get there. But I think people who find themselves unhappy in their career, unhappy where they live, in a bad relationship, like if there's some type of discomfort that is leading them to question their status quo, then I think life planning is a great way to kind of help out. Our instructor in my mentorship, he said everybody would want a life plan, and you don't have to tell them, you can just guide them there. And I don't necessarily disagree with him, but my experience has been, if somebody doesn't come wanting to go deeper, they're not going to be open and vulnerable enough to find out those real answers. But if someone's at that point, where I was a few years ago, of realizing, hey, like there's things that I would really enjoy doing that I'm not doing. How do I make that a part of my life? Then sitting down and diving in and asking good questions. But really what I learned through the Kinder process was what makes a life planner great is the ability to listen, and not just listen, but listen with empathy. And that's the key there, is to give people space to figure things out. Because when you do ask somebody, well, why do you want to retire at 55 or 60 or whatever number they say, they may not really know. That's what my grandparents retired. That's my parents retired. That's what my college professors told me. Okay, great. And help them keep on going further until they find their own answer, find their own truth, which maybe it isn't 65. And then now is when you get to have the fun and like, okay, let's go further and figure out what you really want out of your life. And then let's build a plan to make that your reality.
So how do you get there? Like, what are the steps of, I get the part of like, you can't force somebody into this, right? It's kind of the idea of therapy, right? Like if you're forced to go to therapy, you're going to get a lot less out of it than like you hit that point in your life to say, I need some assistance. I need to go through this. But like, how can you help guide people into understanding the value that this has?
So I'll speak to Kinder's evoke process. Part of my plan in this, because I believe in it so much, is I want to get familiar with the other approaches to life planning. Just so I can speak about it on a greater scale to advisors and say, hey, I believe life planning is the future. It doesn't take away from our need to be technical, but life planning is going to be a part of every firm in the future that will lead to the financial planning that we've known to grow. So with Kinder, he has this evoke process, which is exploration, vision, obstacles, knowledge, and execution. So it is a series of meetings that are designed to guide people through the process of figuring these things out. And he's got his questions that a lot of people know. I would just encourage you, rather than go through the questions and waste time on that, just Google Kinder's 3 questions and you'll find them. There are 3 questions centered around abundance and different levels of mortality, ultimately designed to help you uncover what's most important to you. So real quick, the evoke process, meeting 1 is exploration. Going through at a very high level, figuring out, if you had all the money in the world, what does life look like? Describe your ideal life. And just keeping it very surface level and not getting into the why. The vision meeting comes next. And there's some inspirational work you do between meetings, going through the questions and some other exercises to help clients really figure things out. But in the vision is where we start to kind of go into more of the why. And I think is the most exciting part of the process, because as the title of the type of meeting would lead you to believe, the life planner creates a vision that the client created. So I guess we don't create it. We restate the vision that the client created. So through this conversation, the life planner is able to put together a vision that we recite back to the client to let them see what they said they want their life to look like. And what's really cool, because I experienced this personally through the Evoke training, like I was life planned. So I had a vision meeting with another advisor planning me. In that vision meeting, if done right, the client will light up, because you're describing the life that they said they really wanted, that they don't have, and you're doing it in a way that they emotionally get attached to it. And there's something magical about when you attach emotion to a plan. That's why people actually follow through with their plan. Most financial plans never get executed because there's no emotion attached to it, because they don't really care about it, because it's not really the life they want. And I think life planning solves that. Obstacles, that's where we go through and we revisit that vision. Is that still what you really want? Great. What could get in the way? And then whatever comes to mind to them, you just walk through and you overcome those obstacles with 4 questions that, again, I'll let you kind of search those things out. And then knowledge and execution that's where the financial planning part kind of comes in. But you can see the numbers really don't come in until the end of the process. So that's the way we can help clients. It is you're giving them some prompts, giving them some exercises to really think about what they want, because not everybody has given themselves that thought. They haven't thought that deep into what they want, so they need some guidance. So be there to guide them, be there to ask them questions, and then be there to give them space to figure it out. And for me, one of the things I've had to learn to be better at is to just shut up. I don't like dead air. I like to try to fill it. I used to believe I had a superpower, that I could see potential in others and I could help you see your potential. And what I realized was that I was seeing my potential in them, and that kind of is trying to hijack their vision. So it's really about giving them space. And sometimes it gets uncomfortable, but in that uncomfortable space is where they find their real answers.
It's really interesting because you taught me about this. So this is something that I've actually integrated into my process, and I've never gone through the whole training that you've gone through. So I'm sure I do plenty of things wrong, and that I'm fine to admit that. But I feed people these questions with a video before our first meeting because I found it helps to think about it a little bit ahead of time together. But what I've also found is that not everybody is ready to go that deep. So I have some clients who they email me back responses before times, other people who come to the meetings with stuff written, and other people who are like, I don't really want to go into that right now. And, I think this is just something that's practical for advisors to think through is like, how do you handle that when certain people don't want to go through it? Because me personally, what I've done is I've said, okay, great. Like we'll revisit this in different times of our life where maybe this is more impactful, because sometimes when you engage with people, they want a problem solved first, right? Like, hey, we're facing this, let's get this solved. And then maybe we can take a step back and go deeper. But is it something where you think that that's not really the right way to do it?
I don't believe in absolutes. So I think there is no one right way. There's no universal way. I think there's a right way for you, Thomas, to do it, and a right way for me that feels natural and authentic. So, depending on how you wanted to go about it, if somebody wasn't ready to do that, then they may not be the right client and you might not be the right advisor. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I also don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, like, I get it. You're not ready for that. You want to focus on this thing. Just think about these questions and we'll revisit them in the future, but let's answer the pain point. Because I think that is one thing to think about is if you're trying to bring life planning to clients that's not what they're used to, the reason people reach out to a financial advisor is not to figure out what they want out of life. They've got a pain point financially. They want a solution. They want an answer to it. So they're going to call a financial advisor. So to call a financial advisor with, hey, I've got this old 401k, what do I do with it? And then to be hit with, well, if you don't live another day, what did you not get to do? Who did you not get to become? There's going to be a big disconnect. So I think that meeting them where they're at is important. I don't think it's wrong to give them and get them thinking that way. But I'm the type of person I probably wouldn't force it on them. My hope is as time goes on and my messaging is really clear, that people are only going to come to me when they're ready for that. So that, again, it goes back to your branding and marketing. People know when they come in, we're going kinder, we're not talking about numbers. And truthfully, I would love to get to a point where I just do life plans and refer the financial plan off to an advisor who wants to do the numbers and let me just live in this world of helping people figure out what their authentic life looks like and how to kind of get there from a bigger picture. And then when the numbers come, somebody else can handle that.
That makes sense.
Justin, do you mind my jumping in and
Of course.
asking you,
Come on.
when you do life planning, how often do people, think about post-death as like a big objective of what they want? And I asked this question because actually my husband very clearly, like if you asked him like, what is your goal in life? He would say, I want to leave something to my kids so that they're comfortable, right? Like that, I would feel like I accomplished what I needed to as a father. And of course, it means that we make a lot of choices in our lives, to defer gratification, to like set up our kids for, to set him up on fulfilling that dream. So I'm just curious, like, how does estate planning come into play with life planning?
So I'll be transparent. Not a lot of my clients have gone through life planning in this way, but I have brought some of the life planning components to our regular meetings, which leads us to the answer to your question. I believe life planning brings more clarity to the estate planning process. Because if you're going the traditional planning route, and there's nothing wrong with traditional planning, I've done it for 20 years. But if you're going that way, you may not really be diving deep into the emotions behind money and your values, which may lead you to discovering, well, my main purpose as a father is to make sure my kids are taken care of. Therefore, this is what my estate plan may look like. You may only get to the point of, well, I need to make sure I have the beneficiaries right. And for minors, I have a trust that things will go into that. And that's all that you go through. And that's better than nothing. But the more you get to know you, which I think that a life planning process helps you do that, the more you get to know you and what's most important to you, then I think your estate planning becomes more detailed. And an example, I have a similar goal for my estate planning. I want to, unlike some people, I want to leave money to my kids to give them the freedom to be able to pursue what they feel called to be pursued, because I believe in that I believe in it so much. And not everybody has the financial means to pursue something that may take a long time to bring them what they need from a financial standpoint. So I want them to have the ability to do that. But I don't know why all of a sudden recently I want to have heirlooms to pass on to the kids and generations. So I've gotten into buying art from friends of mine that are artists. And so now I'm collecting these things that I hope, first off, the boys are excited and they think it's cool and one day they would want it. But I want to accumulate some things through life that the value to me is not so much having it. It is more of this thing will be going to one of the boys and then maybe to a grandchild. And then obviously the estate plan allows that to happen. So I think that going through my life plan and going through my pursuit of my authentic life and knowing more and more who I am has allowed me to get way more detailed in my estate plan than it was when we did it first, when we had Roman. Because at that point, I wasn't thinking that way. So a long-winded answer, I think life planning helps the estate planning become more clear. And I also think it becomes more detailed and you can have more intention with it because there's more emotion behind the whys. You know yourself better and you can kind of set things up to make sure it's exactly how you want it because you know how you want it.
Right. It's so interesting that you talk about the heirlooms. I think you and my husband would get along so well. He has this like Duke basketball. He went to Duke. And I talk about that all the time on the podcast. But, it's a big motivator for him to someday pass that. Like it's been signed by Coach K and John Shire and, and he wants to pass that on to a kid. We're having a second kid. So now I don't know what the other kid gets. That's as good as this basketball, but, we'll figure it out. Exactly. So anyways, all of that is to say, I think it's so interesting because we oftentimes don't talk about the value that people put behind objects that to you and me don't look that valuable, right? And so as a financial planner, you're probably like so focused on like the big accounts, you said like priority of accounts and things like that. But truthfully, you don't know what point in time the client is ready to think about estate planning too, because it may not be about the big accounts and it might actually be about some little thing that they have that's valuable to them. So I think that's amazing that through doing your own life planning, you actually discovered this was like something important to you.
Yeah, I mean, grandma's wedding ring may be way more important than the multi-million-dollar IRA. And you would never know that if you didn't go and kind of dive deeper into the question. So I think that, even if you don't do life planning, going through the estate planning process, and obviously as an advisor, not giving the legal advice, but facilitating the conversation to help the client figure out what they want out of their estate plan. If you want to differentiate yourself as an advisor, most advisors are going to go surface level, beneficiaries, trust, and that's it. But if you were able to sit down with a client and say, let's talk about the little things that are really important to you that don't have a beneficiary designation, like what would those things be and where do you want them to go, and open up that conversation, you will probably learn a lot about your clients just by taking that extra time to get to know them a little bit better on things we skip over.
Yeah, it's so interesting you should talk about those like values and objectives, because I would actually argue, I'm an attorney, I would argue that those are the reasons or the ways in which you protect yourself from giving legal advice, because it's totally your job as an advisor to think through your clients' like values and objectives and what goals, they have post-death, for estate planning, but just in general, living life. And, giving the legal advice, it's like, oh, you should have a marital trust, right? That actually shields you from having that conversation potentially. Because what you find out is, they're worried about, they saw their parent, deathbed planning or something like that, and they don't want to do, leave their kids with that kind of situation, right? And so then you just discovered a goal, and you can help them with that, but it's not like giving them legal advice, which I know is a tricky line to toe.
So I'm curious, you talked about with your kids, and I think this is a conversation that we haven't had on here at all, and I think it really relates to life planning well. Your reading die was 0. We're talking here about like giving money to kids and how to do that, and maybe you've had some conversations with this going through life planning as well, but like, how do you make those decisions, right? Because I think we see like the social media side of the world of like, kids shouldn't be given anything. But I think you make a really good point here. And I can even look at my life, right? Like I didn't have student loans. My grandma was paid for our college. I quit playing basketball, right? A scholarship to go to a school that was somewhat expensive. And I think that was like a very big turning point in my life and helping me get to where I'm at and, I'd say you just be happier. And I know if my grandma wasn't able to do that, I would never have been able to make that decision. I would have had to either continue playing basketball or go to a different school that maybe wouldn't have been as good. But then I think about my life post-graduation, right? I didn't have any student loans. I left my first job. I was able to go build a business and do all these types of things because I didn't really have that, over my head. And so I think people look at like sometimes you have advantages, but I think as a parent and somebody that has a good amount of money, it might be the best thing that you can do, but I think it comes hand in hand with education, right? If you just hand your kids a bunch of money, they might just say, I'm never going to work, I'm never going to do anything. Or it could be the opposite, and you might give them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial like, you and your wife are, or just, choose to do things that interest them.
Yeah. Obviously conversation with my wife about, how do we want to do this? And so her and I come from different paths. I went to a D3 school, which is expensive to play basketball, and I didn't pay. I picked up my student loans with a nominally like $17,000 of student loans left is when I picked it up and paid it off. Meanwhile, Ange went to IU, a much cheaper school, but she had to pay her whole way. She had some scholarships and things because growing up, her family didn't have a lot of money, but she worked 2 jobs. I remember we were dating. She would work at Macy's and then go to TGI Fridays and work and during college. So she had to work and put herself through. She had some student loans that we worked through early in our careers. So she comes from not having any help to me kind of having. And I think my values on that have changed recently as I've gotten more creative and gone down this path the last couple of years, and really do believe that we were all created to do something. And I want to give the boys the opportunity, assuming that they are responsible. If I'm going to give them this money and they're going to blow it because I've done a bad job, educating them, then that's a different story. But assuming we do a good job as parents and they're responsible, I want to give them the ability to pursue the thing that they are most called to do without a lot of financial stress. I do think some financial stress is good. It keeps you motivated and keeps you hustling. But I don't want them to not be able to do it because of money. So that is kind of a big motivator for me, which I think is over the last couple of years. But again, I would like to think that while I lived a more privileged life than my wife, we didn't grow up really, really rich. Some might say I was spoiled because I didn't have to work like my wife did. Let's say I was spoiled. I have a good work ethic. I've built a business. I've worked hard. Like being taken care of by my parents didn't make me not appreciate money and not know how to work. So I think it's possible to give your kids a good, put them on third base, but do it in a way that they're going to be responsible, that they're not going to, be spoiled and not know how to work hard and take things for granted and, spoil this money and let it go away. So I'd like to think that we're going to do a good job doing it. So that's the way I look at it.
I think it's an interesting point, right? Because I think some people would probably say the same thing about me, but I think, people who didn't play sports kind of just talk about like, oh, well, you just played a sport, like you didn't really work. But I think working when you're young is actually more about what it teaches you than actually like the monetary value you get out of it, right? Like you're going to school, you're hustling, like Ange did, right? Like she learned what it takes to work hard, but you also learned that through basketball, right? Like you learned, and this is the same thing I learned, is that like if you work really hard at something, you can become good at it and it can do good things for you. And I think that's what actually built you to be a good entrepreneur. But I also think all the stuff that we're talking about is what is life planning at its core, right? Your examples and how you want to take care of your kids is all built through the experiences that you guys had. And you just, this last couple of years, maybe it was when you went through all of this, you realized, okay, here's the change in what I want to do for my kids, which is why I think this can be really impactful to walk through with your clients, because what I find is people don't really know. Like I'll talk just this example of kids, college, etc. I almost find that both spouses are literally never on the same page. One, because they've never really had this without the emotion. It's both kind of a, here's what I did, here's what you did, I want to do what I did, I want to do what my parents did, right? Or the exact opposite. Hey, my parents didn't help me, it sucked. I don't want that to be for my kids, but I think we have to, it really is our job to dive deep into these things and find that meaning so you can help your clients decide how they want to leave the legacy.
And that's the key, is helping the client figure out what they want. It's, there's not a universal right answer. Leaving money to kids for one person may not be the right thing because of their values. I want to live the die with zero mantra. I'm only a few chapters in, but it's really about experiences. So I want to have these experiences. Part of what he talks about is, don't leave them an inheritance, do the things with them now and create these memory dividends. So I want to do that, but I also want to be able to leave them money that gives them a good start towards being able to do what they want and should be doing. So that's me. That's not right for everybody, and that's okay. There is no right way to do it. There's your way to do it, and it's helping people figure out what that is. And then obviously continuing the conversation. The beauty of estate planning is it can be updated very easily. So if things change, if I find out, Roman isn't responsible and he turns out to be a son I didn't want him to be, then I can change things. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But that's the thing, is we need to have these conversations regularly, because things change. Input changes, which means the output needs to change as well. So it's a conversation that should be ongoing, especially when we think about estate planning and, if we're talking about kids, things change. So you need to keep those conversations going.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with you that life planning makes estate planning easier. I'm curious though, when you do life planning, right? I think the first 3 parts are great, but then you get to the obstacles part, right? Mm-hmm. And how do people actually go through this? Because I feel like you talk to people, they're like, oh, my perfect day is this, this, and this. I'd probably not work this job. I would do something fun, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, great. You spend $20,000 a month. You're a lawyer. You make really good money. And you want to go teach Pilates. I don't know if that's necessarily doable. So how do you handle the vision with the reality?
I mean, you help them figure out what they value and prioritize the most. To you and I, going from high paid job to Pilates may not make sense. But if that's really what they want, and then you help them figure out, well, what do they have to give up? What changes do they have to make? I think your job is to help them figure out what's the opportunity cost, what do they have to give up? And then let them decide if they're willing to do that. You may guide them through that conversation, and then when they see all of the stuff they can't do, that, they love Pilates, but not to that level. So then it becomes, okay, maybe you teach a Pilates class once a weekend. So you get to have that thing that you want to do be a part of your life, but it's not, it's not the main thing. And that's the thing that, when I think about what I talk about a lot is following your passions. Not every passion has to be your career, but I think you need to have it in your life. So the life planning conversation combined with the financial planning conversation allows you to figure out, okay, this thing needs to be in your life. To what capacity? Is it your career? Are you willing to make those changes? If not, then how can you still do it and have that passion, but have your career be the means to the end that lets you do that and not have to have so much money coming from it?
Yeah, I love that. You're basically walk through hey, sure, this is what you want. Here's what you necessarily have to give up. It's a show versus tell, right? You're instead of saying you can't do that, you couldn't live your lifestyle, you say, great, this is what you would take home. Let's go through what were the things that you'd have to cut. Is that what you're willing to do? And they might say no. And then the next option would be, okay, great. Well, maybe that means we cut some, we save more, we invest more. So you're closer to the point where you could leave that job and do this. Or option 3 is, hey, just integrate it a little bit more into your life, but keep on the same path. You don't have to give up anything. But you're really just laying out these options and letting them decide. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest transformations that I saw going from the very first place I worked to, working with you and doing financial planning now is like base level financial planning is here's exactly what you need to do, go do it or you're making a mistake. Real financial planning is here's how we accomplish what you want to accomplish. Here's what you maybe have to give up. Here's the paths. What makes sense for you because these aren't my goals. These are your goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that is a good thing to be encouraged. If we go back to the Pilates example, sometimes we have these ideas of something we think we would love. But if you've never taught a Pilates class, how do you know that you really want to leave your high-paying career to go do it? So that's why I'm a big fan of experimenting and exploring. So, again, go teach a class a weekend and see if you actually enjoy teaching Pilates. And then if you do, pick up a class in the evening and like slowly get yourself there so that this leap of faith you think you want to take, if the time comes to take it, it's not as scary because you've been slowly building it up rather than I've had it, I hate my job, I want to be a Pilates teacher, I'm out, I'm going to go do it and make this brash decision only to find out that you actually hate teaching people. You didn't realize it until you actually did it, but you hate teaching people.
Yeah. I mean,
this example could have been me, guys. I was that lawyer, starting out on Wall Street, making money. And then I actually taught on the weekends. I taught SAT classes because I missed teaching high school math.
Oh, I love that. I think it's really good advice to like dip your toes in because I think we all live in the world where the grass is always greener. What we do right now sucks. And like I've had these conversations with Colleen a lot because I think she sees me really happy what I do. I have a lot of freedom to build what I want to build, work when I want, like create. And you don't really have that in a job necessarily. And so there's always the like, well, hey, what if I did this or what if I did that? And I think mine is always like, just try it. Like go see if that you want to do. The last thing you want to do is leave a job that you don't necessarily love. And then all of a sudden, you do this next thing and you're like, gosh, I get paid less. I actually go in every day. Maybe I don't like this as much. And then you kind of burn that bridge, right? Like you want to make sure what you might be doing is going to be better because sometimes if you look inward, it's actually not the thing that we're doing that makes us unhappy. It's actually like what we're going through. And we need to work on kind of ourselves and our mind before we're really going to find fulfillment and happiness in anything that we're doing. Anything else you think that we need to hit on as it relates to life planning and estate planning?
No, if you're an advisor thinking about the future of your career and your business, I think you owe it to yourself to look into life planning. And again, there are a variety of ways to do it, a variety of certificates. They're all going to put the client values and their life at the center and then plan around it. I think that is going to be a very important part of the future of our profession. The technical skills aren't going to go away. We still need to do those things. The traditional financial planning relationship is still going to be needed. But I think more and more people are interested in living the life that they want to, and more so not that they want, but that they feel like they're supposed to be. I don't know if there's like a universal awakening. I had to pull a little bit of woo into this, but I feel like there's something going on, and I don't know if it's coming out of COVID and people, questioning what they were doing beforehand and seeing how life could be. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like more people are more interested in doing the things they want to do most, and they're willing to make sacrifices to make that happen. And if you as an advisor can help facilitate that, help people figure out more about themselves, and then bring this new life that they want to their finances, I think that goes a long way. I think people are going to be looking for advisors to help them live life, not just get through life.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Well, Justin, we really appreciate you coming on. I love what you're doing, and I know you're going to make an impact on a ton of people and a ton of advisors, helping them, find enjoyment and fulfillment in what they're doing. And everybody, we really appreciate you listening. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. The email's in the show notes. And please rate and subscribe, and we'll see you back in a couple weeks.